Hello, time for a Man in Gray book review. Today's book is Invisible Differences, a story of Asperger's, adulting, and living a life in full color by Judy Dachez, with illustrations by Mademoiselle Caroline, and translated from French by Edward Gauvin. And originally published by Omnipress in 2020, it's recently been republished by Omnipress this year in 2025. Excuse me, it's 200 pages. This is a graphic autofiction novel, so it's based on a true story, but the characters are fictionalized. Marguerite is a 27-year-old office worker. She always wears the same kind of bland gray, white, black clothing. She goes through the same rigid routine every day. She walks the same route to work. She always eats the same thing for breakfast. She's very good at her job, but she doesn't interact with any of the other office workers, and she finds their chatter incredibly distracting. She has a boyfriend, but she insists on sleeping in separate beds. And when she goes to sleep, she has to wear earplugs and a face mask because the lights and the sounds of the traffic keep her awake. And as time goes on, her boyfriend starts pressuring her to dress more stylishly and to go out and meet his friends at bars and at parties, which she reluctantly does and then leaves very quickly afterwards. Her boss compliments on her on her work, but he pressures her to interact more with the other people in the office, to go to the picnic, the office picnic, and the office Christmas party, which she refuses to do. So after a while, she becomes concerned about how everybody's pressuring her and how she feels like she's an outsider and doesn't really fit into the rest of the world. She thinks of herself as a freak. And so one day she goes to the computer and starts Googling her symptoms, and she learns about something called Asperger syndrome. And she wonders if she might be someone who has Asperger's or is on the Asperger spectrum. So she goes to her doctor, and her doctor says that you don't have Asperger's because you can look me in the eye. People with Asperger's are not supposed to look people in the eye. So he just dismisses her feelings. But she becomes more convinced that she's probably got Asperger's after she goes to a bookstore and buys a number of books about Asperger's, and she reads up on the symptoms and the case histories of people. She becomes more and more convinced that she probably has it. She finds out that the French government has a study organization that tests people for Asperger's syndrome, and so she applies to get tested, but there's a long backlog of people wanting to get tested, and it's several months before she finally gets tested. And at the end, and she has to wait a while before the test results come in, but she finally discovers that, yes, she is on the Asperger's spectrum of symptoms. And this is like a huge weight lifted off of her, because now she understands that she's not some kind of freak, that there's a lot of people with her condition throughout the country. And she joins a support group, kind of like Alcoholics Anonymous, only it's for people with Asperger's, and they share their stories. And she decides to make changes in her life to free herself, and decides to quit her office job and become an artist. So it follows basically the life story of Julie Dachez, the author, although it's slightly fictionalized. I think anyone who's on the autistic or Asperger's syndrome spectrum will certainly relate to Marguerite's story. Or if you know someone or have family members, you'll certainly relate to that. I was a school teacher for many years and taught a number of kids who had either autism or were on the spectrum of Asperger's and so forth. And I always found that they were very intelligent, very, very focused on what they were doing, but they were not easy to relate to because of their condition. And the important thing that this book makes clear is that this is not a disease. It's not something you can treat. These people have simply differently wired brains than everybody else, and we need to be cognizant of that and supportive of them. Not only is this a story about Asperger's syndrome, it's also an indictment of the French society and government, who, as the author points out, is way behind other countries, U.S. and other European countries, in their support for Asperger's, and the doctors that she comes in contact are completely ignorant about what Asperger's is. Many of them don't have a clue as to the symptoms or the whole spectrum idea and so forth. So, if you are interested in this subject, this is a really wonderful book. It's very well illustrated. It's very well drawn. And it's not a kid's book. It's aimed at adults. There's nothing explicit in it or anything, but I think it'll be more, you'll get more out of it if you're an adult rather than a kid. The book is Invisible Differences. The author is Julie Dachez. The illustrator is Mademoiselle. Caroline, this has been another Manning Great Book Review. Thanks for watching.